Andrew, I'm so excited to have you here today and talking about surviving bully culture, which affects over 75 million Americans alone, which is wild. And in my world, I speak to people every single day that want to leave their workplaces because of a toxic boss. And leaders are the number one reason people often leave organizations. I know it's been the reason why I've wanted to leave certain organizations as well. So I know it's going to be a great conversation. Welcome.
Thank you, Irina. So pleased to be with you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course. Hey, it's Irina Pozan, and welcome back to the Career Cravings Podcast. This podcast has a simple mission. It's to help ambitious professionals like you build the career and life that you've been craving. Over the past 15 years, I've worked as an HR leader, designed hiring systems, led recruitment teams, and I've sat on the other side of the hiring table. I've seen what works in today's job market, what doesn't, and what separates those good candidates from the ones that actually land their dream roles. Now I'm bringing everything I've learned straight to you. Each episode is packed with actionable insights and tools to help you land your dream role sooner. Now let's dive in. So you were a media executive and you spent over 25 years in high pressure media environments. How did you get involved with the topic of bullying?
Well, I didn't, and that's the big problem. I worked for 25 years at places like CNBC, MSNBC as an executive producer. I was vice president of original programming at Court TV, where we covered real trials here in the States and around the world, frankly. And then most recently, I was global head of video at the Wall Street Journal. So I've had my career in New York. And I thought when I came to New York for a television show for my first job, I was so excited. And as I continued my career, I just thought this is the way it is. This is television, high pressure, tough deadlines, intense people. And I never acknowledged it or identified it as workplace bullying. I just thought, Irina, this is what I asked for. This is what I wanted, and this is what I deserve, and get used to it and deal with it. And I didn't really realize until I started writing my book, Surviving Bully Culture, literally decades into my career, I had no idea I had been bullied. I started writing my book, and I'm like, wow, look at all this incivility that occurred to me. And then I started to do some research, and that's when I found out what real workplace bullying was all about. I had no idea. I just thought this was television. What I really found out is it's everywhere in every industry. And what I like to say is, where you find people at work, you'll find bullies at work.
You're so right. Because originally I know we were chatting a little bit before we hit record and you asked me like, have you, has this affected your career? And I'm like, no, I've been really lucky because I think of my most recent boss who was amazing. He was a true mentor. He wanted all of the people on his team to truly grow. He invested so much time and energy into that. But like earlier in my career, that wasn't the case. And I just thought, you know what? I need to put in the time. I need to stay here. I need to put up with this. I need to get that like at least a year in this role to look good on my resume before I can even think about leaving, even though there were times where it was like completely inappropriate what was happening. So, it's hard to sometimes, it's easier to see in hindsight. So I understand. And the media industry has a reputation as well of being really challenging, cutthroat, very competitive. I heard you were pulled off a plane by an angry executive. So what did that moment, so what happened? And also what did that moment teach you about power, humiliation, and just corporate culture in general?
Yeah. So if I may, and I'll get into that, it's even a hard memory after all these years, but let me say a couple things. First, workplace bullying is an abuse of power, and most of us can't just leave. We don't have the luxury of just leaving a job because we have bills to pay. So it's an abuse of power, but let me define it if I may. And I have a very simple definition of workplace bullying, which is this: repeated and targeted conduct that has no benefit to the employee or the business. That's it. Okay. Mm-hmm. Which is a good lead in, I think, to structure what I'm about to tell you about what happened to me. So keep in mind, repeated and targeted conduct that has no benefit to the employee or the business. Okay. This was years ago before 9/11. And it's a bit of a long story, but I'll try to truncate it some. And even as I begin to tell you this story, Irina, I'm defensive because I know that people are going to be listening to this saying, well, he must have done something wrong. He must have been responsible for the anger of the boss. So let me get into it. I was on a plane going to Costa Rica with my then fiance, now my wife, and I get a call from the CEO's assistant, who says, "Hi, Andy, I'm calling for the boss," who I do name in the book, by the way. But I do change a lot of the names in the book. And she says, the boss says, "You need to get off the plane." I'm like, "What?" I go, we're about to leave. The doors are about to close. And indeed, I had some work. There was no real deadline, but I was working on a pilot television program. And it was like 95% done. And I had set up everything. I couldn't get studio time to get it all done. So my editor and director was going to handle the last piece of putting the pilot together. There was no deadline, but it was expected. And I talked to the CEO's number 2, and she said, "Go have a good time." This is an approved vacation. "Go have a good time. I'll take care of anything that comes up." That's a quote from the number 2. "I'll take care of anything that comes up." So we're on the plane. I get this call, and I said, the doors are about to close. I'm like frantic. And she says, "Hold on." She gets back on about 15 seconds later, and I won't use the terms, but there were expletives. She said, "Henry said, get off the plane." So
Wow.
So it was the worst moments of my life. I come back in to work. The CEO never spoke to me again. I was there for another probably 2 months before I lost my job. I got basically demoted, although I didn't lose my title, but they took away from me. I had a hit show that they gave to somebody else, and I was ostracized. I was so ashamed. I had been there 2 terms. I was there for 7.5 years and then came back to Court TV, this cable network that covered real trials. It was the most humiliating, shame-inducing experience, Irina, that I've ever had. Was vice president of original programming. I had given 10 years of my life and my career to that establishment, that media organization. And here I was humiliated. The CEO never spoke to me. All I can figure, Irina, I came back into the office, and the number 2 said, "Well, Henry's really angry, but there's nothing that can be done now, so just go home." And I never took him on, because was I going to say that the number 2, the only thing I can figure out is that she suggested somehow that I hadn't taken care of anything. There were things left undone, and I was going on vacation. That's all, that she sabotaged me over bullying. And I'm pleading with your audience that I really didn't do anything wrong. It was an approved vacation. I set up everything to get done. There wasn't a hard deadline, anything like that. And yet he punished me. He didn't ask me what happened. He didn't call me into his office. They ostracized me. I stayed in my office, and it's in the book, but I'll give away the kind of, just to show you how ashamed I was, because I took such great pride in my work product. I didn't leave the office, and I urinated in a bottle, which I was too ashamed to walk the halls to go to the men's room.
My goodness. Wow.
It was so awful, because so many of us, and what I'd like to say about this is that the people that are good bully targets, the people that get targeted, Irina, are the people who so much care about their jobs. They're devoted, loyal, and productive. They're the ones that when the boss is critical, harshly critical, or scornful, or silencing you, and I know you had an experience where the boss used silence against you. It's we're inherently, we want to belong and we want to be appreciated. Most people, that if they're apathetic, they don't show up to work on time, or they don't get bullied because the boss doesn't care about them. They should, but the people that get targeted for bullying are the ones that the bullies know, the bosses know, that those are the ones that are just going to go back and try harder.
Yes.
They're not going to yell and scream. They're not going to quit. They're devoted, and they're going to just try harder to get the appreciation and even the love of the boss. So it was the worst few months of my career and almost my life. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I had suicidal thoughts. I was never going to act on that, but it was just awful to be treated that way when I had given so much of my life and my career, and I cared so much.
There are so many questions that I want to ask about that. And I'm so sorry you went through that. That's terrible. Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is I don't think the listeners are thinking you must have done something wrong to deserve that. I mean, it sounds like you had a hit show, which shows you're a high performer.
I was. And they did.
I'm curious, why do you think that high performers are targeted?
Well, yeah. So I had another bully boss at another place. I had bully bosses everywhere I went. And by the way, self-blame is so much a part of this. Mm-hmm. We blame ourselves. And I start my book by talking about what's wrong with me. Am I too ambitious? Am I clawing? Am I annoying? What is wrong with me? It's almost a universal feeling when this happens to people. And so I think what happens is that bully bosses lack empathy. And I think many of us who are bully targets are quite empathetic, and they identify They see that we're popular with our colleagues. They see that we're nice people. They see that we're concerned. And these are traits that they don't have, they don't want, and in a way they don't like it. I don't spend a lot of time trying to diagnose bully bosses. It may be that they're egoists. They may be sadists. They may have had a fight with their partner that morning. I don't really care that much. I'm kind of interested in that, but there's not much I can do about that. I care about the victims. And I also, by the way, care about the businesses because bully bosses harm people and they destroy businesses. And we can talk more about that as we go. And I have statistics on it and data on it. But what I would say is there's something about us that bothers them in a way that in the old kind of style school, and I don't know if this was as true in Canada as here in the States, but I assume it was, on the playground, why did the bullies bully the people they bullied? There was something about the victim that they didn't like that bothered them. And it's similar in the workplace. There's something about us that bothers them. A lot of times people say they were threatened. I don't know that I was very threatening. I was a boss myself. I don't know that I threatened anybody. I shouldn't have. The boss had the power.
Yeah,
but there's
it's a power dynamic. That's kind of
Yeah.
what comes to mind for me, right? Like they can.
They can get away
Yeah.
with it. They're allowed to. But whether they're fearful of something, they're fearful of their own jobs. Again, whether they just enjoy the power play, whether they don't like you because of the color of your hair, I don't know. And I should say, I should be careful about that. We do have laws in this country about civil rights codes that if you bully somebody because of the color of their skin, let's say, or their age, or their gender, or their sexual preference, or disability, all those things are covered here by civil rights codes and violations. Bullying, workplace bullying is completely legal. You have no legal recourse right now. And I am working on some ways to give victims recourse and to help businesses thrive, which we can also talk about.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, two questions that kind of come to mind there. The first one is, you have now, since that terrible time in your life, there's been a lot of time that went by. You've now done a lot of research. You've written a book on the topic. You've had a lot of time to reflect. I'm curious, if you could go back in time, is there anything that would have changed in how that situation played out?
Yeah, that's a great question. I appreciate it. I haven't been asked that a lot. It's a very good question. So let me say this about that. What I wouldn't have done and I didn't, is confront the bully boss. Again, there's so much leverage that the boss has. Think about it this way. Who has more power over you than a bully boss or just a boss in general? I did a television show. I created a television show, 4-Court TV, with a sheriff down in North Carolina, almost a stereotypical Southern sheriff. And we shot the show in his jail. And I went there every couple of weeks and I interviewed the inmates. It was great. It was an amazing show. And they were the guests and he was the host. The reason I mention it is because I would go into the jail cells and interview the inmates. And I thought to myself, boy, think about how much power the sheriff has over these inmates, or a judge has in their courtroom over the people that come before them, or your parents, right, have a ton of control over you as a child. But once you become an adult, there's hardly anyone that has the kind of power over your popularity, your ability to pay your bills, your self-esteem and self-worth, your ability to save, again, your mortgage or for your kids' college education. There's so much at stake that for most of us, we don't have the ability to march into that office and tell that so-and-so what you think of them. We can't do it. And it won't work in almost every case. It's not going to happen where the bully boss is going to go, oh gosh, I had no idea. Thank you for
So
telling.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're back
No,
to
I-
Costa Rica now.
Right. Let me take you out to dinner and give you a bonus for being so honest with me. No. And I can laugh about it now a little bit. But what I would have done, I wish I had the tools to deal with it, which is what I have a coaching business where I coach workplace bullying victims about how to cope and heal. And that's what you have control over. And this is true of life generally. You can control how you respond to things. You can't necessarily control the environment that you're in. And so I have something that's in my book and that I talk a lot about and I work with my clients called the 6 tenets of coping and healing. And what that is basically are 6 ways to deal with the daily difficulties of the workplace. It could be a colleague. It's mostly kind of downward, the bullying, but it can be a colleague that's trying to bully you, supervisor, manager, or CEO. And I talk about, first and foremost, the most important thing to do is restoring psychological safety. When this is happening to us, you feel like you're unsafe. The next email, the next text, the next phone call, the next meeting, you're going to be scorned. You're going to be interrupted. They're going to roll their eyes. They won't appreciate you, or you'll be silenced. All of these things create a feeling of insecurity, a lack of psychological safety, where you can almost literally feel like your life isn't safe. That's how, and you go home and the boss is on your shoulder or in your head, Irina. So it's really about establishing that you're okay. You're going to be okay. And so then we talk about rediscovering your self-esteem. We talk about rejuvenating your purpose in work and life, which you lose all of it. It's overwhelming if you allow it to, which I did and most victims do. I work with my clients on reigniting joy in the simple things, taking a walk, listening to music, a good book, children, whatever those things are that you lose. I completely lost joy in life. I love ice cream, couldn't eat ice cream. I loved watching sports on television, couldn't enjoy it. I completely lost my ability to find joy in my life. And then we reiterate the importance of positive self-talk. I mentioned a moment ago that the boss stays with you. I almost got in a car accident because I was driving home once from work and I wasn't even aware of what was going on around me. I was so in my head with the boss yelling at me and my fear of losing my job. You have to kind of bring back the positive in your self-talk. Think about your friends and family who do like you, who do appreciate you, and what do they say about you? And then finally, in the 6 tenets, and I'm going through it kind of quickly, but it's so important, is forgiveness. And I talked earlier about self-blame. We all blame ourselves. Why? What am I doing? Why is the boss treating me this way? I'm trying so hard. I'm doing so well. We need to forgive ourselves first, and then over time, even forgive our bully boss.
As you're describing those 6 tenets, I'm thinking of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? It's like if your need for safety
Correct.
is threatened, how can you enjoy like the purpose, the fulfillment, like the other parts of work that can be great? It's just not possible, right? And I've totally had that experience too, where like driving home or as soon as you put your head down at night, you start replaying all of the things that were said, were not said. I should have done this. I could have done this, and kind of replaying it. And it affects every area of your life. I want to switch gears a little bit to, you mentioned liability for organizations, that this has a cost to the business as well. So from that perspective, I know you mentioned there are certain things that are completely illegal and people understand that. You
Yes.
can't bully people based on the color of their skin and so on. What is the hidden cost to organizations of incivility?
Yeah. So this is a crucial part of my work and the message that I'm getting out. And again, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's so important. And these are problems, both professional and personal, that we can do something about. The broader issues of the world, the wars that are taking place, and the illnesses and diseases that we're trying to solve for. I don't have the answers to that. But the things that we're talking about here about people treating each other justly, fairly, civilly are things that we can do tomorrow. And we'll talk about that too. But MIT Sloan, the business school at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, did a whole study on this. And they found fully $300 billion are lost every year because of this workplace degradation and incivility that we're talking about. Why? Think about it. Burnout. Burnout doesn't happen because people are worked too hard. Burnout happens because the people who are working so hard aren't appreciated. And even worse, they may be negatively impacted because they're not appreciated and they're getting yelled at or screamed at or they're told they're not working hard enough. Absenteeism is a big one. Obviously, with burnout, you have absenteeism. I mean, I've coached and counseled people that cried all the way into work. I've also coached and counseled people that didn't go to work. I came to the Wall Street Journal and there was a bully boss there at the time. I was just a consultant, but the staff that I came into spent much of their time at each other's cubicles complaining about this person.
Yes.
Loss of productivity is unbelievable. And then you have the consequential healthcare costs. People are going to psychiatrists. They need pills. They need time off. They need accommodations. They need FMLA. All these things play into damaging businesses. And ultimately, it comes down to a lack of productivity. People aren't at their best. They're sitting at their cubicles just downtrodden. So as much as I'm advocating for the targets, at the same time, Irina, I'm arguing that bosses and businesses have to understand that they're just hurting themselves. Let's even assume you don't care about your employees, which is horrible to think about. But if you care about your business, if you care about your business, you'll care about your employees. And so there's all this data out there that proves, and I'll give you one other anecdote, if I may. There's a thing in this work called the brilliant jerk. The brilliant jerk is the rainmaker or the handsome or attractive person. I don't want to make it too gendered because this could be a woman or man. By the way, men are close to 75% of the bullies. So I have to put that out there. And I'm not proud of it, but men are most of the bullies. But women can be bullies too, and women often bully other women. Having said that, because it's predominantly going this way, you have to look at it as a cultural problem. And this is something that we can address right away with codes of conduct. You just create codes of conduct like sexual harassment that allows for everyone to sign on the dotted line. I understand how we're supposed to comport ourselves. I understand that I will follow this way of behaving. Managers on down, CEO on down. I'm not looking for a perfect work environment, Irina, not at all. I was an executive producer. I yelled and screamed. I did. I interrupted people. I rolled my eyes at my employees or my staff's ideas. I was not a perfect boss by any stretch, but I never targeted anybody and I never repeatedly abused anybody. And so if people sign on, they can do this tomorrow in your listenership. They can do this tomorrow. Create codes of conduct that everybody signs on to. And then if somebody doesn't, maybe they were hangry, hungry and angry. Maybe they had a bad day, low blood sugar, whatever it is, that's okay. But those people need to be talked to. And if the behavior continues, it should involve their review. It should affect their review, their ability to be promoted, to get a raise, a bonus, and all of the above. And there have to be ramifications to this from the top down. So we identified that it's not just about the employees, it's about the overall business, and we can change this tomorrow.
I've seen this so much from the side of being an HR leader for many years.
Yeah.
We would see groups where, we'd have a couple of complaints come forward about the same leader. And then right away, we're like, maybe something's going on there. And then we look at the healthcare costs and the benefit claims and people going on disability, the absence rates, like all of those things that you're mentioning. And that's how we sort of knew if there was something that was happening there. And
can I just remind myself of a quick anecdote. Forgive me for interjecting, but I didn't want to forget this. So I worked for a guy who looked great in a suit, handsome, 6'4", 220. He looked like a football player. Why? He had been a college football player. And I worked for him. He was 10 years younger than me, my junior. I had no problem with that. But my boss, who I loved, got fired, I think unjustly, but whatever, got let go. And so I became one of his direct reports. And from the moment we started, it felt like he was trying to sabotage me. He didn't want me to succeed. In fact, he wanted me to CC him on every email, micromanaging, a form of bullying. And then real quick, I just thought after a few weeks of this, I thought, let's go out to lunch. We're in this together, maybe get out of the office. And can you believe I was nervous to ask him out to lunch? I was 40 years old. I had overseen $10 million budgets. I had staffs of 50 people, and yet I was scared because he was a bully. And I finally went to him, and he also used an expletive, which I won't use here. But I said to him, hey, you want to go out to lunch and talk about some programming ideas? I was vice president of original programming. And he said, we don't have to effing break bread. You just need to effing do your job.
Response.
Right.
Like, what is the need to go that route? Like, why?
Well, and as I said, when I define bullying as not conducive or not helpful to the employee or the business, how is that helpful to me? How is that helpful to the business? Not at all. And so it's the rainmakers sometimes that look like, and he was smart. He was good at his job. He went on to do big things. Nothing wrong with that. But he did so much damage to so many people that ultimately the brilliant jerk does more harm than good. And there's a company called Rippling, which is a human resource agency. And they've come up with this data looking at the brilliant jerk and helping companies identify where they're losing money, even with somebody that you think is a superstar.
Yes. And you know what? The performance reviews, they are skewed to look at things like maybe in your case, ratings or the results, the tangible cost savings, the results that these people are achieving. And so many people come to mind, by the way, when you're talking about your brilliant jerk. I actually can think of one that was a woman in a media company that I did.
Okay.
She had a reputation of just like yelling at anyone anytime they came in for their business reviews and scolding them. There are certain cases where it's so obvious, like anyone would be able to see that response you got to, that lunch conversation, which was totally appropriate given your title and this is your boss. You're supposed to be able to talk about programming. So there's the obvious ones, but what's the difference between that and the more subtle forms of bullying? And what does that actually look like?
Yeah, there's a spectrum in my view. which starts with, again, maybe interrupting. I had a boss who wasn't really an outward bully, but it was part of a bullying culture. And I'd be at a big meeting with all his direct reports, and every time I'd start talking, he'd start looking at his phone. Now, that might not be bullying, but it makes you feel a certain way, okay? So it starts with that kind of thing, or interrupting, rolling your eyes, maybe scoffing a little bit. And I'll tell you one that is commonplace, people don't think about, and they should, sarcasm. I tell another story in the book about we had a big meeting and we were ordering breakfast, big meeting for some clients coming in. I had nothing to do with it. I was executive vice president of production, but the office manager was new. The food never came. We're in Midtown Manhattan, and she was frantic. And so I volunteered. I said, you know what? It's not coming. Let's run down the street. We'll reorder it at the deli, run back and see if we can get here before the people show up. If they do, we'll be quiet. And we run out. Again, keep in mind, I volunteered for this. I had nothing to do with breakfast. We run back and we make it before the clients showed up. They were caught in traffic, Midtown traffic in New York City. As we're putting the food down, and nobody even helped to place the food, the bully boss, he was the number 2 in the company, says to everybody around the room, the senior team and executive team, Jesus, Regal, you can't even produce breakfast, because I was head of production. Okay. And everybody laughed. Now, I didn't have the right retort at the moment because that's not me. And it was it was kind of a funny line, but what's the message? The message is that I'm worthy of ridicule.
Yeah, you
and of
can't
course,
do
everybody,
that.
right. And I was the one who volunteered to help. I saved the day, but he had to make a snide comment. And of course, everybody laughs because they want to make sure he knows that they think it's funny. So they don't, so that is a real form of bullying, sarcasm. And then it goes on. The worst form is silence. As I said, when I got taken off the plane and the CEO never spoke to me again. When you're ostracized, when you're not invited on an email chain, you're not invited. It happened to me too. An offsite meeting I wasn't invited to. That is the worst. And too many managers, too many bosses use silence as a weapon, and it's evil. If you're upset with an employee, if you think they've done something wrong, you owe it to them to talk to them. And many bosses don't have it in them to do it for whatever reason. They punish people and they won't even talk to them to give them a chance to explain. And we all make mistakes. I was not a perfect employee, nor was I a perfect boss. But the things that happened to me had nothing to do with performance. Nothing.
Wow.
And I'm speaking for all victims. And even after all these years, Irina, it's still in me, and I'm still coping and healing from it. I still have recurring dreams of these things. Of course, I'm living it with my book coming out. But my mission now, my advocacy is all about trying to help people either who have been through this or to help them avoid it.
You're actually helping me live here because
I'm so happy. That makes me so happy. One person at a time. That's what I'm about. One person at a time.
Because as you talk about this, like originally when you asked, has this affected you? I'm like, oh, not really, but like maybe once or whatever.
Yeah.
And the silence piece, the fact that you're acknowledging that silencing someone or not speaking to them is a form of bullying, that's so validating to me because I know how it affected me. But it's not one of those things that's super blatant where, I told anyone about, maybe just my boss. I mean, my husband now,
Yeah.
my boyfriend. But at the time, thinking back, so what happened in my case, we were expected to work in the office. This is way before 2020, a long time before that. And there was a known snowstorm coming into Toronto. It was known. I had lived over an hour away from the city, and so did my peer, my coworker. She lived actually even further than I did. And ahead of this snowstorm, I bring my laptop home, just knowing if like the roads are closed, if it's terrible, I'm going to work from home. And that morning, sure enough, same thing. A lot of the highways are closed and so on. I'm like, I'm going to work from home. And I was super junior. My leader was an HR manager at the time. And I just text her. I'm like, hey, roads are terrible. I'm going to work from home for the day. Hope that's okay. She doesn't respond. I'm like, okay, whatever. I worked. I'm into the office the next day. And me and my coworker, same thing. She walks past us. Her desk was behind ours, walks past us, doesn't say a word. We can feel her glaring at us at our screens, and we felt like, okay, we cannot be talking today. This is like a silent day. Then everyone else that comes by the HR department, she's like the nicest, kindest person. So over the top, how are you? Come stop for lunch. And like completely ignoring us. She didn't talk to us for a week. It was just the strangest, most childish situation, but it affected me because I was really worried. I'm like, well, what does that mean? And we did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
We did nothing wrong. It was just inconvenient for her.
Yeah. And I'll tell you an exact similar story, but you were starting to lose your psychological safety because you're like, oh, she hates me, or, you don't know.
What am I supposed to do? Like, am I supposed to be quiet? It's this awkwardness. I
Right.
couldn't focus on my job, right?
And it doesn't seem like you felt comfortable to go up to her and say, hey, what's
Yeah.
the deal? Right. None of us do. Being a bully victim is such a universal experience. In fact, we were talking earlier about now if I meet somebody who hasn't been bullied,
Mhm.
I'm shocked. I used to be shocked that there were other people like me. When I first started doing this work, I had no idea. Now I'm shocked when I meet.
About it. It's kind of, you are
It's
ashamed that it
taboo.
happened to you, right?
It's so taboo. And who are you going to go to?
Yeah.
Your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, partner can't help. I didn't want my colleagues to know how it was affecting me. And I was concerned that people were going to be like, my friends even be like, well, what's wrong with him? But let me tell you exactly, I worked on a television show. I was a senior producer on a television show. The executive producer who I adored got fired. You'll see the repetition here. She got fired. She got bullied, ostracized, and fired. So they brought in a consultant who I knew a bit. I knew of her. I didn't really know her well, but we knew of each other. She starts out, it was the worst job I ever had, but we were there on Sunday mornings from 9 a.m. to like 11 p.m. It was a startup show, first season. We weren't even on the air yet. This new person comes in as a consultant, the new executive producer. Sunday morning, I'm there at 9 in the morning. I'm going to be there till 11 because we have a show this week. But she came in, walked right by my office. Her office was 2 doors down. Doesn't even acknowledge me. My door's open. She puts her coat down. I can hear her jingling her keys, whatever. She walks back across the aisle where my door's open. Doesn't acknowledge me. And I'm the senior person in the office with my staff, with my team. Then I hear her exactly like what you said, laughing with my team. And it was mostly a female staff. She never would speak to me the entire day she was there. She might be there for 4 hours. I was there for probably 12. Never acknowledged my presence.
Yeah, that's what it was. Not acknowledging. Yeah.
And it's so hurtful because inherently we want to belong. We want to be appreciated. I was doing good work, hard work, and she wouldn't even acknowledge my existence. Yeah, it hurts.
So if someone's also listening to this and they're like, you know what? Me too. I'm experiencing this now, or I have in the past. If someone's going through this situation now, what is something that they can do? What can they do?
What I'd like to offer to your listeners is my bullying recovery guide. Free, completely free. And you can get it at bullyingrecoveryguide.com. Bullyingrecovery.com. Totally free. And it really goes through in even greater detail, obviously, the 6 tenets of coping and healing with some exercises you can do if you're in the throes of this or you're through it. That's my gift to bully victims. It really is a lot of content. It's easy to read. It's digital, so you can get it right away. And I only wish something like this existed when I was going through it. I didn't even go online at any point. It didn't occur to me. There are resources now. There are good people helping. That is the best thing I can do, other than I hope they listened and I hope that what we've been talking about provided some relief. And you used the great word validation, because that's the beginning of healing, is validating your feelings that it's not you, it's them. As long as you're doing good work. Look, I was a boss. I had to fire people who didn't do the job. But my job as a boss was to try to make them better. Why wouldn't I? So these are about good employees who care. And so if you're going through this, you don't have to be alone. Those are my 2 big things. No self-blame, and you're not alone. And just by virtue of you offering this opportunity, you're helping in this mission. And I know you do great work in the kind of career fulfillment. You can't be fulfilled in your job if you're being mistreated. And so I'd love to offer this to your listeners in the hope that, as I said before, one victim at a time, and then one culture, one office at a time, we can really change things up. And of course, I've written my book to kind of, hear from me what happened to me. And then I extrapolate in my book. I interview experts. I interview, academicians and professors and neurobiologists and legal scholars to talk about all of the issues that we've addressed today and that you've been so kind to address with me in a broader experience. But I hope it's a good read too. I'm a storyteller, I'm a producer, so I try to make it an experience that people can relate to, but also hopefully they'll feel bad for me and be sympathetic towards me. That's the whole goal.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know this is going to be useful to so many people listening. So thank you. And I'm going to link it below as well for people.
Yeah,
so just
it's called Surviving Bully Culture, and it's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. So thank you for that.
And also, I want to thank you just for being so vulnerable and open. I know there is a lot you're also working through, sharing these stories, and they're very personal, but I know it's going to touch many people. So excited to see the ripple effect of what happens to organizations as well, to change and to have less tolerance for this. I think we've come a long way since like the Me Too movement, and there's been certain things, but I think this conversation for me is just highlighting how it's not always blatant. It's not always obvious. And people take it to mean something about them and their self-worth instead of trying to make a change, right? So
yeah, we have a long way to go. I'm hoping that this can be the next movement. I will tell you that Canada's further along in its understanding of this issue than the States. So congratulations to Canada. There's many more people working on this, and they're doing good work.
well, thank you so much for being here, Andy. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Irina. You're a real pro, and I appreciate it.
Hey, before you go, if you've enjoyed listening to today's show, I would love your support. Please take a moment to leave a review anywhere where you listen to podcasts. And here's the exciting part. I'm running a special contest and giving away a one-on-one session with yours truly. All you have to do is leave a review, take a screenshot, and send it to me in my DMs. All of my contact info is in the show notes. I appreciate you so much, and I cannot wait to build the career and life that you've been craving together. See you next week.